One player for whom I have tremendous respect is Indian Grandmaster Sasikiran Krishnan. Well, I personally know him and I have played in his team for Maharashtra Chess League, and I know the way this guy thinks. He's a very serious thinker, and also his level of chess knowledge as well as calculating abilities is right up there. He's one of the best in the world. So when there is something that he's not able to solve or he doesn't do it properly, then I assume that it is something of great instructive value for the entire chess community in general, and that is the reason why I have made this video in which Sasikiran, who was playing with the black pieces, was up against Amin Tabatabaei from the Asian Nations Cup. And this is the position that we have on the board. It was the fourth round and a very crucial game because three boards in the match had ended in draws. So everything hinged on this game between Sasikiran and Tabatabaei. If it was a draw, then India makes a draw in the match. If India loses, because in any case Sasikiran was under pressure, so the chances of him winning were very less. Now in this position it was black to move, and Sasikiran took the pawn on f3. Natural thing would have been to recapture it back with the pawn, but Tabatabaei had ne4 prepared, attacking the rook. The rook had to move on the d file, and now came knight c5. So you can see that this bishop is attacked twice and it has to be defended. King e8 looks very logical because you are able to come out of the pin, and also if white recaptures this pawn, you can just move your bishop out somewhere and then hope that you can make a draw. Maybe there are other possible moves here as well, like bishop to c8 perhaps, but maybe this is fine, and black has decent chances here. However, the Iranian player took on d7, takes, and after king into f3 we reach this extremely important king and pawn endgame, and this is what I want to discuss with you today. So my recommendation to you is take 20 minutes on the clock. Okay, it's really important that you think on this position for any serious student. It's black to move. What should he do in order to make sure that India doesn't lose the match? There's so much on stake. After you have thought for your move, you can restart the video and listen to the entire solution. So right now go ahead and pause the video. Okay, I hope that you had a good think, and I also hope that you realized that black is unable to hold a draw if he resorts to passive defense here. What do I mean by passive defense? I'll come to it, but the right way to actually hold a draw here is to counter attack, and this is a very difficult thing to understand. You have to rely solely on calculation. I think Sasikiran would have had very less time on the clock to get all the details right, and so he must have gone for the most natural move here, king e6. And if you play this move, I wouldn't blame you because it's very natural, but it's incorrect because white goes king g4. Very nice move. You're moving towards the h pawn to push the black kings and to push the black king. And after say king f6 or king f7, you go king g5, king h5, king g7, king g5, and what you want to do is put your king on near the pawn and then push down your g pawn. There's a small trick here. So for example, in the game Sasikiran went h6, but let's assume you go for the move king f7. Now as white, what would you do here? And this is a very famous position. I remember there was a game where Tiger Hilla Pearson, who was playing the defensive role in such a, not exactly the same, resigned after his king made a move like king, after his opponent made a move king h6. because he realized that after he goes back and the pawn is pushed and you reach a position like this, he would have to resign because the white king will just run to the queen side and win all the pawns. But he missed something very simple, and that was that after king f8, king f6, king e8, king e6, king d8, king d6, you have this nice move a5 which forces a draw. So because if you take this, my king is within the square of the a pawn, and if you play king c6, I can just take on b4, and this is opposition and a draw. So white has to be a little careful and not go king h6 here, but instead just play king f5, when after if you go king g7, you are just too slow. I can just move my king towards the queen side, pick up the pawns, and after a4 you can continue this line with black does queen first, but oops, pawn push, but he loses the queen and it's winning for white. And instead of, let's say, king g7, if you play king e7, then after g4, king d7, king d5, king c7, king e6, king c6, and now you make g4, and after, let's say, h6 or something, you can just move quickly towards the h pawn, win it, and win the game. So that's the reason why in the game Sasikiran here played the move h6, but it was also insufficient because after king f5, good move, king f7, king e5, king e7. If you go king g6, I think it will lead to the same variation that we saw, which was black will win the g2 pawn, but in this pawn race, white makes a queen, checks the black king, takes the queen, and then he's a pawn up. So king e5, he can't go king g7, and after king e7, king d5, king d7, king c5, king c7, you have this last waiting move with the pawn, g4. Black has no more waiting moves. If the king goes to d7, you can just move in and pick up the pawns. And if you go to b7, king d6, king b6, king e6, king c6, king f6, king d5, king g6, white is able to win the h pawn, and he is much faster in the race. So this is how the game ended, and Sasikiran resigned. So the $1 million question is, how do you make a draw? And I think after all of this explanation, it must have become clear to you that here, in order to make a draw, black has to create some kind of a quick inroad into white's position, and that happens with the move a5. Excellent move. The logic of it is that you want to create a weakness that is accessible. For example, in this position, white's weakness is on a3, which is just too far for the black king to reach. But when you play a5, and if white doesn't take it, then you can create the weakness on b4, which will save a tempo for you. And the other thing is, if after a5 white were to take the pawn, then after king c7, king g4, king b7, king h5, king a6, king h6, king a5, king h7, white is, well, a little slow. Black is in time to make his queen, and it's a draw. So coming back over here, after a5, he cannot take the pawn, and if you can't take the pawn, then you will have to maybe move your king to either e4, f4, or g4. If king g4, and this is the key line because white is going towards the h pawn, black can take, and play king d6 and bring his king to the b4 pawn and just make a draw. You know, this is really very, very instructive. And in case white wants to stay in the center, he plays king e4. Then here AB, and king e6 is good enough for a draw because black has the opposition here. If you go g3, I go h5, I still have the opposition. If you go g4, I'll go h6, and then I just keep moving in the direction of white's king. So that's a draw, and in case white tries to be cheeky and plays king f4, I think after AB, king d6, it's just equal, because once again if you go on the king side, I'm able to move to the queen side, and if you want to play king e4, I can play king e6, and I have the opposition because g4 h6 and g3 h5. So that's how Sasikiran would have been able to hold a draw in this position. I want to bring your attention once again to this move a5, which looks highly inconsequential. You know, what exactly is the pawn move doing on the queen side? But I hope that you have understood it, and perhaps you might be able to use it in one of your games. Because always remember, counter attack is many times the right way to save the game.